There's a number on the bottom of your credit card statement that your bank spent considerable time and resources calculating. Not the balance, not the interest rate, the minimum payment due. That number is not there to help you get out of debt. It is not a suggested payoff amount. It is not a responsible baseline designed with your financial well-being in mind. It is the smallest amount the bank can legally require you to pay while keeping you in the debt cycle for the maximum possible duration, generating the maximum possible interest revenue before your balance finally reaches zero. That is not a cynical interpretation. That is the functional design of the product. And once you understand the math behind it, the minimum payment line on your statement will never look the same again. My name is William. Today we're going through exactly how the minimum payment trap works, what it actually costs in total dollars, and the specific strategies that get you out, because the difference between the right payoff approach and the default one is not a small number. It is, in most cases, thousands of dollars and years of your financial life. First, what minimum payments actually are and how they're calculated. Most credit card minimum payments are calculated as either a flat dollar amount, typically $25 to $35, or a small percentage of the outstanding balance, usually 1% to 2% plus that month's interest charges, whichever is greater applies. The percentage-based calculation is where the trap lives, because as your balance decreases, your minimum payment decreases with it, which sounds like progress, which feels like the debt shrinking, which is exactly the psychological illusion the structure is designed to create. Here's what's actually happening. When your minimum payment shrinks as your balance shrinks, you are paying less toward the principal each month as time goes on. The payoff timeline extends. The interest accumulates on a smaller balance but for a longer period. The bank collects more total interest from a smaller balance than it would have if your payment had stayed fixed. The declining minimum payment is not evidence of progress. It is a mechanism for extending the revenue timeline on your debt. The math. What a $5,000 balance actually costs at minimum payments. The average credit card APR in 2026 sits above 21%. Take a $5,000 balance at 21% interest, make only the minimum payment each month, starting at roughly $100 and declining as the balance falls. Payoff timeline, approximately 18 to 20 years. Total interest paid, approximately $8,200. You borrowed $5,000, you pay back $13,200. The interest alone is 164% of the original balance, and you spent the better part of 2 decades doing it. That number lands differently when you convert it into what $8,200 could have become instead. Invested at historical average market returns over that same period, $8,200 compounds to approximately $35,000 to $40,000. The true cost of the minimum payment strategy isn't $8,200 in interest. It's the $35,000 that $8,200 never became because it went to the bank instead. Now run the same $5,000 balance at a fixed $200 monthly payment, roughly double the starting minimum. Payoff timeline, 2 years and 8 months. Total interest paid, approximately $1,600. The difference between making the minimum payment and paying a fixed $200 monthly on a $5,000 balance is $6,600 in interest and 15 years of your financial life from one decision made once on a balance that most Americans would consider modest. Why people stay stuck. The psychology is as deliberate as the math. The minimum payment trap works not just because of interest rates, but because of how the human brain processes small numbers over long time horizons. $100 a month feels manageable. It feels responsible. You're paying something, you're not defaulting, you're handling the obligation. The brain registers the payment as financial progress because a payment was made and the account is current. The fact that $75 of that $100 went to interest and only $25 reduced the actual balance is not something the statement communicates clearly, and the bank has no incentive to communicate it clearly. There's a second psychological mechanism at work. Credit card spending separates the pleasure of the purchase from the pain of payment by weeks. You get the item now.
The discomfort arrives later, diluted across a statement full of line items you barely recognize. By the time the bill arrives, the emotional connection to the original spending decision is largely gone. You're paying for a feeling you no longer have, at an interest rate that compounds the cost of that feeling every single month you don't clear the balance. The combination, manageable feeling minimums, separated pain from purchase, declining payments that feel like progress, produces a debt cycle that can persist for decades in people who are otherwise financially responsible. This is not a trap that catches careless people. It catches careful ones, too.
The 2 strategies that actually work, and which one to use. The debt avalanche method targets your highest interest rate balance first, while maintaining minimum payments on everything else. Once the highest rate balance is cleared, that payment rolls into the next highest rate balance. Mathematically, this method minimizes total interest paid across multiple balances and produces the fastest payoff at the lowest total cost. The debt snowball method targets your smallest balance first, regardless of interest rate, pays it off completely, then rolls that payment into the next smallest balance. Mathematically less efficient than the avalanche, behaviorally more effective for most people, because clearing a balance completely produces a psychological win that sustains momentum through a long payoff process. Research from the Harvard Business Review found that people using the snowball method were more likely to successfully eliminate their total debt than people using the avalanche, specifically because the early wins maintained the motivation required to keep going. The mathematically optimal strategy loses to the psychologically sustainable one if you don't finish. The honest recommendation? If you have high discipline and similar balance sizes, use the avalanche and save more in interest. If you have multiple balances of varying sizes and have struggled to stay motivated on debt payoff before, use the snowball and get the wins that keep you moving. Either strategy, executed consistently, produces dramatically better outcomes than minimum payments. The choice between them matters less than the decision to stop paying the minimum and start paying with intent. But there's a third option worth knowing about that most people never consider: the balance transfer. Many credit cards offer 0% introductory APR periods on transferred balances, typically ranging from 12 to 21 months. If you can qualify for one of these cards and transfer a high-interest balance onto it, every dollar you pay during that window goes entirely toward principal, zero interest. The same $200 monthly payment that would take nearly 3 years to clear a $5,000 balance at 21% will eliminate it completely in 25 months at 0%. The catch is the transfer fee, typically 3% to 5% of the balance, and the discipline required to clear the balance before the promotional period ends. If you don't, the remaining balance often reverts to a standard rate that can be equally punishing as what you left. But for someone with a realistic payoff timeline that fits within the promotional window and the discipline to not accumulate new charges on the old card, the balance transfer is one of the most financially efficient debt tools available and one of the least used because the industry buries it in the fine print rather than advertising it prominently. One more number worth knowing, and what to do with it. Paying off a credit card charging 21% interest is mathematically identical to earning a guaranteed 21% return on that money, tax-free, with zero market risk. That return does not exist anywhere, not in stocks, not in real estate, not in any investment product available at any risk level. The highest guaranteed return available to most Americans right now is sitting on their credit card statement, disguised as a balance they've been meaning to address. Most people intellectually understand that credit card debt is expensive. What they underestimate is how that expense interacts with everything else they're trying to build financially. Every dollar going toward interest on a credit card balance is a dollar not going into an emergency fund, a retirement account, or a brokerage. The drag isn't just the interest itself, it's the compounding growth that interest payment is displacing across every other financial priority simultaneously. There's also a credit score dimension worth naming.
Credit utilization, the percentage of your available credit you're currently using, is the second largest factor in your credit score after payment history, accounting for approximately 30% of the total calculation. Carrying a $5,000 balance on a card with a $6,000 limit puts your utilization at 83%. The threshold most scoring models reward is below 30%, ideally below 10%. The same payoff strategy that eliminates your interest cost is simultaneously rebuilding the credit score that determines the interest rate you'll be offered on every future loan, mortgage, car, refinancing. The financial benefits compound in both directions at once. The minimum payment keeps you in the system. It keeps the balance alive, the interest accumulating, and the bank's revenue stream intact for as long as you'll allow it. The exit is a fixed monthly payment significantly above the minimum, or a strategic balance transfer that eliminates interest entirely during the payoff window, applied consistently to the right balance in the right order until the balance is gone. That's the whole strategy. It doesn't require financial expertise, it doesn't require a higher income, it requires understanding what the minimum payment actually is and deciding you're no longer willing to pay for what it costs.